Okay, these candles are made from animal fat rather than beeswax. They're a little bit cheaper. And the cotton wicks have dissolved underwater over 132 years for a few inches on either side. So those are interesting. These clay pipes were a really popular item with the Native Americans. And the matches, the sulfur tips have washed off, but you can still see where they were, a little bit darker at the tip. The contents of the icebox found on the main deck. We have bones from a pig, a calf, and an ox. So that was part of a meal that was never eaten on the boat. Pocket knives are still sharp. You can still cut with them. Again, everything was wet, but it was protected from the oxygen, and so that preserved it for 132 years. And over here we have an interesting item. These are these things that look like wrenches. These are bed keys. They were used for tightening the ropes on your rope bed, and that's actually where we get the phrase, "good night, sleep tight." And of course, don't let the bed bugs bite, because bed bugs were a really big problem in the mid-19th century in this part of the world. Mattress springs had recently been invented, but it was much more expensive to buy a spring mattress, and apparently some people were afraid that the metal springs would attract lightning. We have lots and lots of cigar boxes and coffee boxes on this back wall. The toolbox, this is interesting. This is the box in which Frozen Charlotte was found. For some reason, the Frozen Charlotte doll was wrapped up in a wool sock and hidden in the bottom of the toolbox. And so maybe she was intended as a gift for a little girl out west, or a memento of a little girl who was left out east. But the toolbox had less mud inside than just about any other container on the boat, because it was so beautifully constructed. Carpenters would use their toolboxes as advertisements for their services, and so they made sure that they did their absolute best work when they constructed their toolboxes. And you'll notice that a lot of the tools in our collection they're better made, but they look just like something you could buy at the store today. A lot of these tools have not changed in concept whatsoever over the last century and a half. An axe is an axe, a hammer is a hammer, but the nails are all square because they were hand forged by a blacksmith, and the wrenches and nuts and bolts are all square. Alright, now I'm going to take you over to the lab, and I'm going to show you how we clean and preserve artifacts. Lab. This is where we clean and preserve all of the artifacts, and you'll notice below the counter we have examples of what things look like before they're cleaned. My friend Roche here is working hard at work on a blacksmith's forge. We actually use metal tools to clean all of our metal, and she's going to tell you a little bit about that.
The tools that we use to clean the metal, we use little hammers, little chisels, and dental picks. And we
a little more in the light.
We use little hammers and we use little chisels and dental picks to clean the metal. What has happened is that the mud has soaked up some of that metal over the years from the artifacts, and so when it hardens and dries on there, it oxidizes when the oxygen hits it, and it also hardens and forms almost a kind of metal itself. So we have to be very careful when we remove that metal, the mud from the artifacts. So we basically just take little hammers and chisels and start breaking away that mud and use dental picks to get inside the little grooves. And then once we have the big chunks of mud off of the artifacts, then we'll take a drafting tool with a pencil eraser in the end. This drafting tool with the pencil eraser is what we use to take the surface rust off of the artifacts. We're basically just going to run it over the artifact just like this. Once that surface rust has been removed, then we'll put a couple layers of tannic acid on the artifact. Tannic acid is like the concentrated form of coffee or tea. It's also found in red wine. If you soak oak leaves in water, the brown stuff that comes from the oak leaves that soaks into the water is tannic acid. We put a couple layers of that on the artifacts to create a nice protective barrier to protect the artifacts from rusting inside the display cases. And that's basically how the metal is taken care of.
Are these nails?
These are nails, yes. This is what they look like before.
They might in a barrel probably.
Yes, a wooden keg.
And doorknobs, you think?
Doorknobs, and we have some hinges here. Here are 2 rolling pins. This is an example of what happens to an artifact when it doesn't make it to that preservation process. Several years ago, a technician was sawing some of these rolling pins out to preserve, and this one got away from her and hid under a shelf and she didn't see it. She came back on a Monday morning and found it, and in just 72 hours time, that's how much this one had collapsed and dehydrated. The other one spent about 9 months being preserved. It spent 6 months in the polyethylene glycol and another 2.5 to 3 months in the freeze dryer.
Good. So what are you working on now?
I'm working on a blacksmith forge. What I'm doing is removing the sediment, the mud from the outside of it very carefully using a little hammer chisel and then taking a brush. And then I will be I'm also using this pencil eraser to erase a lot of that surface rust off of it. And then I'll put some tannic acid on it when it's all finished the project.
Good. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Oh, did you show them the rolling pin?
I did.
Oh, good, good. All right, well, follow me this way, please. Thank you, Roche.
You're welcome.
This is part of the snag, the sink, the Steamboat Arabius. This is the whole reason we're here. This was an entire tree. It turned out it was a walnut tree. Part of it broke off and washed away downstream at some point, but this is the part that was still lodged in the hull 132 years later. It's pretty amazing. These are the boilers, the original boilers of the boat. And actually this wooden floor on which we're standing, this floor is the same size and same shape as the deck of this Steamboat Arabia. So this gives you a really good idea of scale. And we've actually placed the boilers right in the center of the deck, right where they were found. And we have lots and lots of artifacts on this wall. There are over 200 tons of artifacts again, and we still have about 1/3 of them left to clean, but that means that every time you come back to the museum, you always see something new, something different that you haven't seen before. It's a work in progress.